Hello, welcome to In Brandon. My name is Randi Curry and I'm joined today here with Patrick Pulak, the City of Brandon Engineering Water Resources?
Director of Engineering Services and Water Resources.
Perfect, that is a long title, Patrick.
Yes,
Sorry.
we're working on it.
And we are here today talking about lead in the water of the City of Brandon.
Yes.
Is that correct? So do you want to give me a little bit of a background on what exactly we're talking about? Because lead sounds scary.
It certainly does. So within Brandon, and within any city in fact, we have a water distribution network. And so that distribution network consists mainly of what we call our feeder lines or water mains. And then from those water mains, we have services that run from the water main to individual residents or properties or commercial businesses, institutions, and so on. Those services are typically installed by the developer, and over the years, the material that has been used for those services has changed. So in the 40s and early 50s, right up into the 60s, lead was one of the materials of choice for those water services. So.
Interesting. And that causes, or poses rather, an issue to the City of Brandon. How?
Well, it's all about chemistry. So within the water service itself, when water sits in contact with the lead material of the service, over time that lead can literally migrate into the water in solution. So what happens is you then take in the water and you can build up a lead concentration within the body. So that's really the issue at hand. So.
Interesting. Could you explain some of the repercussions of that? Like what would happen to residents?
Well, there is long-term health implications. Studies have suggested that long-term exposure does have adverse health effects. Now, I'm certainly not a medical practitioner or doctor, so to say what those long-term health effects, I'm not really qualified to say that, but within the City of Brandon webpage, we do have links that will take you to websites for Manitoba Health that will kind of give it a detailed, but I would suggest that it is long-term exposure, that it is, if at all there is exposure. Now that said, you have to have lead in the water in order to be exposed to it. So
right.
The question is kind of how did we get there? What do we do going forward?
Well, that's a great question. So what is the City of Brandon planning to do with this problem?
Well, I think the important thing is maybe to give a bit of history on how we got there. So back in 2013, as most people are aware of, Flint, Michigan has probably been in the spotlight most with lead services. It became, they certainly have a big issue. It's not the same issue that we have in Brandon, but it did bring lead services to the spotlight for the media. So in response, the province of Manitoba conducted a survey within the city, looking at several residents taking water samples to find out if there indeed was a lead issue in Brandon. Based on the information they collected, they did find that some houses were above the Canadian drinking water standard for lead, which is anything above 0.01 is considered above the standard. So they did find several homes that were above that standard. They brought it to our attention. Out of that, we formed essentially a working group. It would be ourselves, the province of Manitoba, and the Office of Drinking Water to really examine the issue and what do we do going forward to communicate to the people who may be exposed with lead services. So what the first thing that we did was to try and, you have to quantify kind of where the problem is. So first thing we did was we looked at what areas of Brandon were really may have lead services. So we identified a catchment area within Brandon. We were typically looking at houses that were built in the late 40s, 50s, some in the early 60s. And we offered up for people within that catchment area, we communicated to those people and said, listen, if you want, you can come and have your water tested for lead. For $20, we'll subsidize the rest. Typically The cost for testing for lead is $45 plus the transportation cost. So we said, if you bring in your water sample, we'll give you a procedure for testing. You bring in your water sample, we will then take it and send it to our accredited lab in Winnipeg, have it tested. Once we get the results back, you get a copy of the results. And based on that information, we can kind of decide how we're going to proceed with that. So that really took us up to 2016. That working group helped us form what we call a lead services strategy going forward.
Okay, so you guys have identified the problem. You've built a strategy. What comes after the strategy? What is your plan to fix the problem once you identify if homes even have this problem?
Right. So I think it's important to note that in Brandon, we suspected that there was 5,000 homes that may have lead services. Now, it's important to note that back when these services were installed by the developers, it wasn't always just lead. It wasn't that simple. Back in 2014, in Brandon, we have water meters that are radio controlled. The batteries needed to be replaced. In 2014, they did a battery replacement. So we had workers from our utility department, our meter department, going in replacing batteries. And at that point in time, they did an informal survey of looking at these services to try and determine whether or not they were lead. So a lead service will typically be kind of a flat grain color. If you take a penny, it's easily scratched, as opposed to copper or plastic or any other material. So based on that survey, we kind of suspect now, instead of that 5,000 number that we were within the catchment area, we were down to about 800 or 900. Okay.
That's significantly less.
It is significantly less. It was a surprise. Well, we always suspected, but we never had the data to support that. Even then, my level of confidence that number may it may be a bit lower, may be a bit higher. We don't know for sure, but at least it puts it somewhat in context of what are we dealing with. So, based on that information, working within our working group, and it was truly a collaborative effort between ourselves, the province, and Office of Water Stewardship. What came out of it was really a three-pronged approach to dealing with lead services in Brandon. So first and foremost was offering what we call a water filter rebate program. Second was development of a policy where if somebody wanted to replace their lead service, they would pay for the portion that's on their property, and we would pay for the portion that's on the city property. City property portion tends to be significantly more costly because of curbs, the roads, the sidewalks that we have to repair afterward. And then the last part is really the long-term solution, which is looking at what can we do from a treatment process at the water treatment plant to try and inhibit that chemical reaction that takes place between the service and water.
Okay. I just want to back up just a little bit. You had mentioned that when you were replacing batteries in the water meters, that the people that were replacing these batteries, the workers, they were able to visually see the difference between a lead connection and a not lead connection.
Right.
Is this something that homeowners can do themselves? Something that they can identify without having to necessarily go into the program or go through the trouble of this or the cost? Something where they can identify if they're even need to go through these steps, if they're at a risk?
Right. Certainly they can, and we have communicated that to them. We did send out an information pamphlet to all residents within the catchment area.
The 5,000 or the 800?
No, the 5,000.
The 5,000.
So every property within that catchment area received an information pamphlet. The problem with the way doing it, as I said, where you can take a look at the lead service comes up through the foundation, you can see about that much of it depending on what type of house you have, is that it's not always a true indicator of what the service is. We've seen instances where you may see lead, but underneath the house it switches to copper.
Okay.
So that's the problem. The only reason we conducted it during the water meter battery replacement program was that we just wanted to have some sense of what scale we were talking about. Again, it's not end-all be-all for determining whether or not the people are at risk. And that's the fear that we had, was that we just didn't want this to become the litmus test for whether or not you truly were at risk.
Right. So this, homeowners aren't plumbers. So,
Right.
so it's very hard to tell the difference between different fixtures and different metals. And B, it can change halfway through the foundation or through your plumbing system.
And we've even seen some residents who we're sure have lead services who are not having lead concentration above the standard within their home. So we're not exactly sure why that happens. We suspect that it may be related to, over time with these older lead services, we get a scale buildup inside the pipe that maybe isolates the water from the pipe, but we can't be 100% sure. So
right. You had mentioned 3 forums really to eliminate this problem or fix this problem. One was policy, one was rebate, and the other was the water treatment plant in Brandon or outside of Brandon itself. Talk about just a little bit the policy and how that's going to change or evolve.
Well, the policy, it already exists. It was a policy that was developed in 1992 and adopted by council at that time. And the policy said at that time was that if a resident wanted to replace their lead service, and I'm just going to back up just a bit. So there's 2 portions to a service, a water service. There's the portion that exists on property, and there's a portion that exists essentially from, if you have a sidewalk, it's from the edge of the sidewalk all the way out to the water main in the road. That's what we call our city right-of-way, and that is city property. So there's 2 portions of it. So the 92 policy said if a resident wanted to replace their service, that they would pay for their share plus 50% of the share that exists on city property. Now, as we've been going through, as we've been going through this kind of discussion and developing a new strategy, council has indicated that they are amiable to amending that policy to say, listen, you pay for what's on your side, we'll pay for what's on our side. And again, our side tends to be significantly more costly than the resident side. So that's something we hope to have in front of council in the next month or 2.
Okay. This could be another rabbit trail, but I just saw it, so I'm going to take it.
Yeah.
What if a homeowner, let's say, doesn't have the financial means to change this service that's running into their home, but it is dangerous to their health? Is there a medium ground? Is there a fixture or some sort of filtration system that they could use rather than changing the plumbing in their whole house or front yard? Or
well, again, it's just the service, and I would just caution is that we don't use that the water's dangerous, because it certainly is. Our drinking water in Brandon is completely safe to drink. In the entire history of our water treatment plant, we've never had a boil water advisory. So I still say to people that our drinking water is safe. So we just have this one issue that when we're talking about long-term exposure, so we're not talking about, and it is more susceptible to younger children. So the question now, getting back to your question, was, what other choices are there than just replacing the service? So one of the things we did offer in 2016, and again we've extended it to 2017, is a water filter rebate program. Now this is not something that's new. It exists in Calgary, it exists in Montreal, it exists in other centers. So we didn't recreate the wheel, but there are filters out there that are relatively cheap that will remove lead from your drinking water. Again, as part of that information package that we sent out to all the residents within the catchment area, included this information on this rebate, which is a one-time rebate up to $100 for the purchase of a filter, a certified filter, that removes lead. So if they buy a filter, and we went out and they're readily available in Brandon, we couldn't support any one business over the other, so we just said, listen, it had to meet this standard. They range from $40 to $200 to really the sky's the limit. If you want to buy a $2,000 system that mounts under your sink and has these big tanks, to power to you, you still only get $100 back. But if you spend $50, you get $50. So it is a one-time rebate. It we ran it through 2016. Council expressed a desire to extend it through 2017, and that's been adopted by Council, and it's currently running through 2017. Now, I could talk about the long-term solution, which really then...
Yes, go ahead.
So the last one that I talked about out of those three things that we included in the strategy was we need to look at something that was a long-term, because a water filter rebate is not a long-term solution. The ultimate solution is replacing these services, but at minimum cost, we're looking at $16 to $17 million to replace all the services in Brandon. And when you kind of look at, and this is a utility cost, when you look at our utility budget, it is not something that we could do reasonably over the next 10 or 20 years. So the question is, really, what is the long-term fiscally responsible solution? One of the things we did was, through the help of the University of Manitoba, we conducted a study on the chemistry of our water in Brandon. And they looked at several areas, and it's important to know and understand that chemistry of water changes from place to place. Brandon's water is not the same as Portage's water, it's not the same as Winnipeg's water. So every solution you want to come up with is slightly tailored for your chemistry. So the University of Manitoba, and it was done by a graduate student, suggested that we move to the addition of what we call orthophosphates at the water treatment plant. Now, it's a big word, but in simple terms, orthophosphates acts as an inhibitor in that chemistry between the lead surface and the water. It inhibits that transfer of lead from the surface into the water. And so, other than that, if you don't have a lead surface, it has no health effects, it does nothing to you. But where you do have a lead surface, it acts as an inhibitor. So we see other centers have used that. By all indicators, any testing they have done seems to work. So I think that is a reasonable long-term solution that we're looking at implementing at our water treatment plant. Hopefully it's something we can do in the next 1 or 2 years.
That sounds like you guys have covered all of your bases.
It's, this is 2013, we're at 2017 now. It's been 4 years. It is not static. We continue to work with the working group that we have. We still communicate between each other and see if we can't tweak anything that we're doing, trying to keep the public informed. That's huge. It's always about communication, because media, in order to sell papers will make it more dramatic than it necessarily is. So the important thing is to get that information out to the residents. So at least they can make it, if they have a decision to make, they can make it from an educated point of view.
That's good to know. Sometimes media will put a scary spin on something just to kind of sell more papers or something like that. So you're saying that it's not detrimental to our health, it's not an immediate danger. Prolonged, yes, but there's multiple steps that the city has taken to make sure that the community members are educated, they have the proper steps at their disposal to fix the problem and have a long-term solution in play as well.
Right, and again, I said it before and I'll say it again, I encourage residents to go to our website. If they do want to educate themselves as to the health effects, as I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm not going to diagnose people or symptoms. I would suggest that they go to the website. The province has excellent information available on long-term health effects on lead exposure, and it's clearly indicated on our webpage. So I certainly encourage that.
Good. So for the community members of Brandon, how would they take a step to get involved in the program, to get the water sample from the city, to send it to see if this is even a problem in their home?
Right. The easiest way to do it is, right now it's all run out of our engineering office at 638 on Princess Avenue across from the old number 1 fire hall. If you come there, the girl at the front desk who runs the program for us will certainly set them up with a sample bottle, tell them they will give them a procedure to follow when sampling. We'll take their information, we'll process payment, and she'll take care of you. The other thing is, again, go to our city website. That information's available there on other things that, whether or not, how do you become what's the word I'm looking for? How do you become eligible for the filter rebate program? That's the important, another important thing. Is that's all on our website as well.
Good. You used a word to describe the area in which you believe the possible problem lies, the
catchment area.
The catchment area. So what if a community member that doesn't live within this catchment area, which I'm assuming is indicated on the website that you talked about, if you're in that area, if you live outside of that area, is this still something that you can test for and take part in the testing program?
Absolutely. We'll certainly will process, in this case, the $20 or the subsidized. We don't subsidize the testing in that case if you live outside the catchment area.
Okay.
If you want to come in and have your water tested, we'll take payment of $45. You'll go home, take your sample. We will have it shipped into Winnipeg. We will have the results shipped to us, and you'll get back the original results. Now, the reason I suggest you do it through us and not do it on your own is we get a great rate from the accredited lab because of the sheer volume. All our testing from our wastewater plant, from our water treatment plant, all go to an accredited lab in Winnipeg. So the rates that we're getting for lead testing are significantly cheaper than what you would get if a resident was just going to try and do it on their own. So.
Right. Perfect. Is there anything else that you want to advise the community on today?
I would just, what I've said before, educate themselves as to the issue, because there is a lot of information out there, and I won't say misinformation, but it can be misconstrued in a negative way. So the best way is educate yourself, and that information is readily available on our website. So.
Perfect. And that website is the City of Brandon?
It'd be www.brandon.ca.
Perfect. And then is there a certain area on the website that they should go to?
Well, there'll be a link right on the front page. If you look at the website, you'll actually see a little banner that says lead services. You just click on that banner and it'll take you right to the spot you need to be.
Perfect. And for any of our residents that don't have internet connections, is there a phone number that they could
Yes, they can call 204-729-2214.
Perfect. And that's the City of Brandon?
That is the City of Brandon Engineering Department.
Great.
Okay.
Well, if there's nothing else that you would like to discuss, I think that's all my questions for today. And I feel like the community really got what they needed to learn.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me today, Patrick.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining me today on In Brandon. That was Patrick Pulak, and he is the
Director of Engineering Services and Water Resources.
Perfect. I thought I'd let him take it away that time. And I'm Randi Curry. Thanks for joining us.